Hello everyone. So in the last video we looked at the uniform and the basic equipment that US soldiers and Marines carried in World War I, including the M1910 Haversack. And so I talked a little bit about why this was a pretty terrible thing. We're going to go into a little bit more of that today and what they actually carried inside of this thing. So we first talked about the M1910 entrenching tool that's attached to the pack, as well as the bayonet on the side here. You have your blanket bedroll that would oftentimes have a shelter half wrapped around the top of this, and you would have your tent pegs and things sometimes strapped inside of there. So one of the things that's important to look at this is that it's very small. So your blanket takes up about 60% of the overall amount of space this pack is actually using. So you really don't have very much space to put much of anything. It's only about 2/10 of a cubic foot of space, so smaller than a shoebox of actual room inside of here, not counting your meat can pouch. So on the top here, your meat can pouch is basically your mess utensils and meat can. So this meat can opens up like this, and it forms kind of a skillet, but also a dinner plate. And the very end of the war, they started doing a different design that would make this a little bit deeper. And by World War II, the design would actually have a cutout in the middle so that you could actually flip this and set it on there and you could actually use it a lot better. And inside of your meat can pouch, you have your fork, your spoon, and your knife. Now the knife and fork were in these protective leather cases, and these are reproductions that I made for them. So you'd have a knife, fork, and spoon for your mess equipment. Now, one of the reasons this is a pretty terrible pack, and why I don't really say backpack, is because it's not actually a backpack. It kind of looks like it would be, but it's a series of flaps and straps that all hook together to form this monstrosity thing. So if you think about any time you've ever worn a backpack, if you needed to get something out of it while it's on you, all you have to do is ask somebody. If you had a friend next to you and say, hey, can you unzip my bag? And they unzip it and get something out. You can't do that with this. So to get inside of this, you first have to lay it completely flat, or at least flat enough you can get to the back of it. And first we're going to do the strap to open this. Underneath this is another strap. It's going to open the interior. So we'll get to that. Okay, let's move this down a little bit. Now, if you happen to notice some writing inside of this, one of the things that happens with a lot of World War I equipment is after the war, this became surplus. There were so many millions of them made. And so this went into the civilian market in a lot of ways. So a lot of times you'll find World War I gear going to Boy Scouts, like what this one went to. This was Troop 62 Beaver Patrol. So you can find them in a lot of different shapes and configurations with people who've cut stuff off of them, or made notes or wrote their name, stuff like that. So the actual space you have to carry anything is all right here. Now, according to the regulation in the manual, you're supposed to carry hard bread as the primary form of ration you're going to carry in this thing. You're supposed to have 4 of these. Now, this is a sealed US 8-ounce hard bread, and you're supposed to have 4 of these. So 3 lined up here, a 4th one on top, plus your condiment can and bacon can. So that's going to take up the bulk of whatever you have, and then your toiletries are going to go on top. But in reality, on the front, these are going to be very rare. So there's always the manual and then the way people actually did it. So you're not going to see very many of these. Now, when it comes to the actual stuff you do carry, since you don't typically have access to this kind of thing, one of the issues that the US faced when we got into the war is that we really were not prepared to be able to outfit and equip 4 million people and then send all that equipment and those people across the ocean, particularly when this comes to food. Now, most Americans, the best they could get in France was in a field kitchen, so a hot meal, being able to actually utilize your meat can and your utensils in this way. But if you could not get access to a field kitchen, you were supposed to be issued a meat ration of either bacon or corned beef, 12 ounces, in the bacon can. And so this was going to sit up top here. You also have your condiment can. Now this is double-sided, so it's 2 screw top caps, and it's divided in the middle. So this is where you keep things like your coffee, sugar, any spare matches, something you want to make sure doesn't get wet or gets exposed to gas. You also have something like a spare pair of socks. And then you have things like this. So again, when the US got into the war, we don't have any version of like an MRE or C ration. So what the US did was contract with companies that were already making canned goods and have them produce things for the war effort, like this Patrol brand salmon or Defender brand tomatoes or these stringless beans. And so this is the kind of thing you would definitely see throughout World War I, is Americans just having some version of commercially produced food. Could be Libby's corned beef, could be a lot of different things. The only other item you really have inside of here is your toiletry kit, which we'll look at now. Lastly, we have your toiletries. So your shaving gear, soap, toothbrush, all of that. According to the manual, that would be wrapped up in a towel and folded up and put above all of your food items in the haversack. Now, most of that kind of thing is generally not actually issued to the servicemen and women. That's still true even today. So it would be privately purchased. So you get whatever brands you kind of wanted. But there was also things like comfort kits. So this is one that is based on a pattern that was original to the period. Another style was kind of like a drawstring bag. And these would be basically issued in ads from the American Red Cross, the Salvation Army, the YMCA, encouraging people back home to make these kits to send to servicemen overseas. It's not dissimilar from things we've seen in the last 20 years for people serving overseas in Iraq or Afghanistan or anywhere else, like care packages. So this specific design was asked to have an American flag on the outside. And again, I made this one from a specific pattern, and the original ones would have had specifications of exactly what you should put in it, things that you should or should not have, things to definitely include. And there's the pattern had specific places for things, and I've made this one just based on stuff that I already had. So one thing that soldiers definitely wanted to be able to do was to write home. So writing equipment, things like a small notebook like this one that I made that has just basic pages to write with, as well as your pencils that you would use. Now, some other things you could keep in this that would also be sent: postcards like this one, I'm talking about Liberty Bonds, or this one that is actually designed by the YMCA, so you can see with the American Expeditionary Force. Or this other little thing, this is also from the YMCA, Popular Songs of the AEF. They also produced a pocket Bible and some other patriotic items. This one was actually printed in Paris in 1918. So things that were lightweight, easy to carry, small, items like that could be sent. You also have things like candy, so like Lifesavers, and this is a reproduction label on original Lifesavers. Also, tobacco equipment. So it is very common for soldiers at that point to be smoking cigarettes, but it's not uncommon to still have men who would smoke a pipe. So you have your pipe, tobacco, matches, and a little pipe tamp. You also have a sewing kit, and your sewing kit has basic things like thread, needles, safety pins, a small pair of scissors, because if you have to actually repair anything, it's far easier to just do it yourself. We also have a soap dish and a reproduction ivory soap. Your tooth powder and toothbrush, and these are reproduction. So the tooth powder, they do actually have toothpaste as a thing that exists, but most people are still using powder. It's kind of like baking soda. Just wet the toothbrush and dip it in that and brush your teeth. And then we have the shaving equipment. Now, shaving cream, you've probably seen it where they'd have a shaving mug and a brush and mix it all up and then, lather it on. Well, that does work, and people do have that, but it's pretty messy. So a lot of guys will actually carry a shaving stick like this one made from Colgate. And this would work like deodorant is in modern day. So you'd pull the stick out a little bit, just wet the top of it, rub this onto your face to be able to get a good lather. And it's much cleaner, much simpler to be able to use this. Shaving is vitally important in the First World War, particularly for your gas mask. In order for your gas mask to seal well, you need to be clean shaven at least every 2 or 3 days, if not sooner. So up through 1917, American soldiers were not issued shaving equipment. They would buy it themselves. But in 1918, the Army did begin actually issuing razors. And so this is one from the Autostrop company. So this is the Autostrop safety razor. Gillette made their own version of this. And you could privately purchase these, or again, these were issued in 1918. And so this one has the basic safety razor head and the handle that screws together. Your blades are in this little container. Why this one is called the Autostrop is because it has this leather strop with it. Now you've probably seen how barbers in movies and TV and stuff would have a leather strop and they would physically move the blade up and down on it. Well, this works the same way. You would attach the leather to a nail or a hook, something on a wall somewhere, and as you move the razor up and down, it would physically flip itself over and strop itself. So you have your razor and shaving equipment and a mirror. Now this mirror and all mirrors that they would typically have, and this original one would have had a round mirror that would go right here, but this is just a different one that I have, is made of metal. If this thing were made of glass, it would obviously break inside of all this equipment. So being made of metal, it's a lot easier to keep it in good condition. So this is the basic equipment that a lot of American doughboys would have had in France. Now again, there's a lot of other things that comfort kits might have had, things like spare socks and extra handkerchiefs and foot powder or combs or hard candy or playing cards. There's a lot of things that could be sent overseas, but you really don't have that much room. So in terms of what you actually have, outside of your eating equipment, you have your comfort kit, maybe you have some other stuff that you bring with you, but other than that, you don't have that much space. So this is about what you carry.